everyone. Welcome to the second Direct Agents 10-Minute Trends webinar. There has been just a ton going on recently, so our goal is to get everybody really up to date and caught up in the next 10 minutes. Quickly to introduce ourselves, my name is Megan Conahan. I'm an EVP at Direct Agents.
And I'm Jackson Richards, Director of Strategy at Direct Agents.
So we put the agenda into the chat today. So if you want to see what we're going to cover, you can check that out. And if you do have any questions while we're going through things, please feel free to chat us. And if we have some time, we'll go through it. Okay, so Jackson, last week we talked a lot about some of the optimistic trends that we're seeing, especially in some categories like upticks, promising trend lines, things like that. You know, where are we now? What are we seeing? Where are some of those key categories as far as a rebound essentially right now?
Sure. So we're starting to see shopping and e-commerce bounce back across a wide set of categories. It's not everywhere yet by any means, but in even just over the last week, we're seeing more consumer demand increase across a wider set of categories. So I'll get into those categories in just a second, but I think there's a few factors here. So one, we kind of touched on this last week, potentially the impact of stimulus checks hitting people's accounts. I definitely think we've seen a correlation in terms of timing with that. Also, some states have begun to slowly reopen. So not only do we feel that is increasing, shopping within those states, but I think it's also just leading to an overall feeling across the country that we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel and come out of this, increasing consumer confidence. But also people have just are bracing for kind of a new normal and seeing new needs and are shopping for those needs to address that. So we shared some of these charts last week. Essentially what we're doing is we're analyzing Amazon search data to gauge demand across a wide set of categories. So a few categories where we're starting to see this bounce back over the last several weeks are clothing and apparel and electronics. And I think these two categories kind of stand in contrast for some interesting reasons. So electronics is starting to bounce back. I think, people just cut spending in the early days of the pandemic, but the electronics category is kind of slowly returning to normal. Whereas the clothing and apparel company, clothing has been a category that's been really sticky for physical retail. People like to go and try on their clothes. I think the necessity for shopping online within this category is going to has led people to adopting a new way of shopping within this category. So we're not only seeing the clothing and apparel vertical come back really strong within e-commerce, but I think this is just going to accelerate tremendous growth within this category going in the future as people begin to shop for clothes more online if they were maybe resistant to it before.
Yeah, and I know we talked last week about like beauty and home and garden and things like that. And I think this will be really interesting. And I'm also very curious, kind of as you mentioned, states reopen, how that's going to affect the split between physical retail and e-commerce. But obviously, we don't have that yet. So that'll be something interesting that we're going to keep our eye on. The second thing I actually thought was really, really interesting and also reminded me to buy my mom flowers for Mother's Day. So it was like a two birds, one stone kind of situation, is we're seeing people just shop a lot sooner this year as compared to last year. So can you talk about kind of some of the trends that we're seeing when we're talking about Mother's Day and what this means for advertisers just more holistically moving forward?
Yeah, so again, looking at Amazon search data to really gauge what consumer demand is and what people are actively shopping for, we found it really interesting to uncover that people were shopping almost 2 full weeks earlier for Mother's Day this year versus last year. Mother's Day gift related terms popped into the top 25 terms on Amazon, the week of 4/19 this year versus May 5th last year, and Mother's Day was only a couple days apart this year versus last year. So I think there's a few reasons for this. One is that I think people have more time on their hands right now. They're spending all the time at home, so there are fewer distractions to get in the way and less reason to do last minute Mother's Day shopping. But also I think that there's less confidence in Amazon or any other marketplaces fast 2-day shipping or next day delivery. So people want to get ahead of it and place orders earlier than usual. Also, I just think this year there years, the trend is going to, it's indicative of the trend of just people are shopping online more versus in physical retail. Um, but I think this is also just, you know, relevant to a trend that we've seen happening over the course of a few years, which is just exacerbated now, of marketing for around holidays or tentpole events starts earlier and earlier. And I think this is going to accelerate that trend. So we're already having conversations with our clients around what's the, you know, what are we going to do and activate earlier for Father's Day or Memorial Day promotions, or even things like Prime Day. Because if you don't get out ahead of this and meet the consumer demand, which we're seeing is starting earlier, then your competitors are going to beat you, or you're just leaving a lot of revenue on the table because people are actively searching earlier, and you're not there to meet them.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're thinking that this isn't just like something unique to Mother's Day, but for every major holiday, we're just going to see people shopping kind of sooner and sooner, and therefore brands have to build out those plans even earlier, right?
Yeah, that's what I think. It might not be to the same extent as Mother's Day. We'll have to see, but I think that's the general trend.
Yeah, I think somebody made a joke on our end that people can't just do the default take mom out to lunch anymore. So they're like, oh no, we have to buy something now. Yeah, and I think
Exactly.
it's kind of interesting to see how this kind of moves forward.
We can have a Zoom lunch with our mothers.
That's true. That's true. My mom is terrible at Zoom lunches or Zoom periods, so that's another problem. Okay, and the final thing I actually wanted to talk to you about is out of home. So obviously, brands pretty much all paused or suspended a lot of their out of home advertising right around March with the increasing stay at home orders. But we're starting to see states open back up again. So that means people are traveling again, and brands are kind of looking to their plans and their advertising and media mixes for the future. So, you know, what are we seeing? Is out of home spending picking back up? What are the opportunities there? Should people be spending in out of home? Like, where are we with that specific category?
It's starting to pick back up, and I think over the next couple of weeks, we're going to really see that accelerate. Out of home was, of course, one of the first cuts to be made for marketing plans, as people were not going to be spending time outside of their house. So brands just wanted to either bring that money back in or postpone those campaigns. As some states have reopened, we're starting to see Americans just starting to travel a little bit more. And I imagine it's going to be a little bit more the next week and a little bit more the following week. There's still some really competitive rates out there in terms of different types of out-of-home placements, whether it's billboards or digital out-of-home placements. So I think as people are going to be spending more time outside of the house over the course of the next several weeks and months, advertisers are starting to jump on those competitive rates that are being offered by the media providers.
Yeah, and do you think that this is something that people or brands should activate specifically in markets that are a little bit less restricted, or you think that people should start doing more of a national plan, just ready for the open up of pretty much all of America?
Our recommendation, you know, regardless of the situation, is just be where your customers are or where your likely customers are. So if you're in a state, you know, if you're in New York City where people are still mostly spending time inside, maybe it doesn't make as much sense as a state like Texas or Georgia, where the restrictions have eased up a lot earlier and people are able to spend more time outside the house. So it definitely depends on where your consumers are.
Awesome. We do have a couple minutes left, and or 1 minute left, sorry. And we had one question from Michelle, and she said, do we have any examples of out-of-home clients who are now looking to spend? And I'd almost say, like, maybe more generically, what types of brands would make sense to spend on out-of-home, and does it differ from just like the regular brands that are spending across other media channels? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think it depends. We expect to see it more for categories that have typically been more sticky in terms of physical retail. So like home and garden, where maybe that's a category where people have not been able to prepare like usual for getting their yard ready for summer, things like that. And that might be the first type of stores that people want to revisit once restrictions ease. So it definitely depends on categories. It's not something that we anticipate seeing across the board. But then again, we don't see all categories really heavy up in out-of-home advertising in regular times anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, we are pretty much just at 10 minutes. So thank you everybody for joining us today. Again, every Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern, we will be talking about the 10-minute trends that we've been seeing over the past week. If you do have any questions, and Michelle, if you want more details specifically on out of home, please feel free to email marketing@directagents.com and we'd be more than happy to get back to you. So we will see you all next week. Thanks,
Thanks,
Jackson.
everyone.